In this lesson on blood vessels, we're going to compare and contrast the structure and function of arteries, veins, and capillaries, and we're going to do that by filling in this table. We've got arteries, veins, and capillaries across the top, and form or structure up here and function down here. I'm actually going to start down here with function. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. I'm going to use this symbol for a heart, even though, of course, that's not what a heart looks like. And veins carry blood towards the heart. They have a similar overall organization, but the amount of the different tissues in their walls varies. So an artery in cross-section looks something like this. This inner layer here is the lumen. Recall that's where the blood flows. And then surrounding that lumen, there is a thin layer of cells called the endothelium. The endothelium is the layer right next to where the blood flows. And then outside of that, there is a layer with muscle and elastic fibers. And then the outer layer is a thick layer of connective tissue. This muscular and elastic layer is very thick because arteries serve as a pressure reservoir. What do I mean by that? Well, when the heart pumps, it's pumping blood into the arteries, and the arteries stretch out and they absorb some of that pressure, and then when the heart relaxes, they give some of that pressure back and keep the blood flowing. So you might have seen numbers like this reported for blood pressure. The top number is the systolic blood pressure. That is the pressure when the heart is contracting, or in systole. And the bottom number is the diastolic blood pressure. That's the blood pressure during the time that the ventricles or squeezing chambers of the heart are relaxing. So the fact that the arteries expand during this systolic part of the cycle and absorb some of that blood and then contract back and release it forward or push it forward during diastole is why this number is not higher and this number is not lower. In other words, that expansion and then the force that they give back during diastole helps to even out the blood flow a little bit, so it's not just all or nothing. That's what I mean when I say that arteries serve as a pressure reservoir, and that's a function of the fact that they have so much muscular and elastic tissue. Veins have the same layers as arteries, but they have different amounts of the tissue. And veins tend to be larger, they have a larger lumen, and flatter, and they're compressible. So if this is the outer connective tissue layer, then the muscular and elastic layer in here is going to be thinner than it is in arteries. So this is the muscle and elastic layer. And the endothelium, which would be the next layer in, is again present. And then the lumen is on the very inside. So veins have less elastic and muscular tissue than arteries do. Veins, in contrast to arteries, which are the pressure reservoir, veins are a volume reservoir. Your veins contain more than half of your blood, and they're carrying that at low pressure, but at high volume, whereas the arteries are at relatively high pressure and lower volume. Now, in contrast to the arteries, which are at high pressure, they're right after the heart, so the heart's pumping blood right into them, the veins at low pressure need help moving the blood along. And so they're very compressible, and they run through muscles, and so when the muscles around them compress, that helps squeeze the blood back towards the heart. For example, when you walk, you are compressing the veins in your legs with the muscles in your legs, and that's helping pump blood back towards your heart. Veins also have valves in them, so if I draw a vein sliced lengthwise here, they have valves in them, so if blood is flowing back towards the heart this way, it pushes those valves against the vein wall and the blood can flow up. But if the blood tries to flow back in the other direction, that will push these valves closed, and then blood can't flow backwards. So the valves in veins help prevent blood from flowing in the wrong direction. Now, in contrast to arteries and veins, capillaries are specialized for exchange, for bringing things to the tissues and carrying wastes away. So, for example, if this were a capillary cut lengthwise, oxygen and nutrients are diffusing out of the capillary into the surrounding tissues to nourish them, and wastes like carbon dioxide and other wastes are diffusing out. So capillaries need to be specialized, optimized for that purpose. If we look at a capillary in cross-section, it is only a single cell thick at its wall. So I should mention that these three diagrams that I've drawn are very much not to scale. Capillaries are way, way smaller than arteries and veins. And capillaries are really only one red blood cell thick. So there's one red blood cell that's squeezing its way through a capillary. So that inner wall, which is really the only wall now for the capillary, is again the endothelium. And there's a membrane around that called the basement membrane. So again, the capillary wall is one cell thick, and that facilitates exchange. Also, there can be gaps between the cells, and in capillaries that need to perform a lot of exchange, like in the kidney or in the intestine, there can be even larger gaps, and those are called fenestrations. So fenestrations are larger gaps between the cells making up the capillary wall, allowing more materials to pass through. But all capillaries allow exchange to some extent. That's really their function. Just a note about some other terminology that you might sometimes see. The connective tissue layer on the outside of the arteries and veins is sometimes called the tunica externa, or the most external layer, whereas the muscle and elastic tissue is called the tunica media, and the endothelium is also called the tunica intima, because it is the most closely associated with the lumen, which is where the blood is flowing. Again, that's here and here. So that's a quick look at arteries, veins, and capillaries, and how their form fits their function.